This reading is from On This Shining Night by the Reverend Dr. Rebecca Ann Parker. My despair and isolation came to a crisis one night. I was past living one day at a time, or even 1 hour at a time, and was down to the question of whether I would be willing to continue to live at all. In the depths of that sadness, I decided to stop pacing the hall. It was after midnight. I left my house and walked down the hill to Lake Union. At the bottom of the hill, the street ended and the lakeside park began. I walked across the wet grass and climbed the last rise before the final descent to the water's edge. As I crested the rise, I discovered a line of dark objects between me and the shore, a barricade I was going to have to cross to get to the water. I didn't remember this barricade being there before, and it was so dark I couldn't tell what I was seeing. But as I edged closer, I discovered it was a line of human beings hunched over some strange-looking, spindly equipment. Telescopes. It was the Seattle Astronomy Club. To make my way to my death, I had to get past an enthusiast in tennis shoes. He assumed I had come to look at the stars. "Here, let me show you," he said, and began to explain the star cluster of his telescope, that his telescope was focused on. I had to brush the tears from my eyes to look through his telescope. There it was, a red-orange spiral galaxy. And then he focused it on Jupiter, and I peered through to see the giant, glowing planet. I could not bring myself to continue my journey. In a world where people get up in the middle of the night to look at the stars, I could not end my life. I know there is grace, because my life was saved by the Seattle Astronomy Club.
I like to tell the story of a coworker who, when you saw her in the hall or first thing in the morning and said, "Hey, how are you?" she would say, "Better by the grace." It always reminded me of that old saying, "There but for the grace of God go I." It also reminded me that grace was not a word I heard often or used often. Grace was definitely not a part of my vocabulary of faith. In seminary, I learned about the ancient argument between those who believe we can do nothing at all to move towards grace and those who believe we can reach out and take the gift of grace offered by a loving God. I am one who cringes at athletes and actors who give all the credit to God. I know exactly on which side of the ancient argument I stand. If life offers me a gift, I will reach out and grab it, loudly proclaiming like Sally Field at the Oscars, "You like me, you really, really like me. I deserve this, I really, really deserve this." Frederick Buechner says that grace is something you can never get, but can only be given. There's no way to earn it or deserve it or bring it about any more than you can deserve the taste of raspberries and cream, or earn good looks or bring about your own birth. That I do deserve the taste of raspberries and cream, don't I? I am not alone in my entitled reward me now attitude. In our striving to make of our lives what we would have them be, most of us think if we just make enough money, we can buy enough raspberries and cream to make us happy. We can have enough plastic surgery to earn our good looks. We can earn good grades, go to good schools, and get good jobs. We don't need grace. We can do this on our own. There, but for the grace of God go I, is an old-fashioned, outdated saying that belongs to our parents' generation. There, but for the sweat of my own brow go I, is closer to what we think while we watch the parade of broken human beings pass by. I worked hard to get where I am, and I deserve everything I have. And then grace happens. I worked hard for 7 years in seminary to get myself to the point where I could appear before the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, the MFC, and receive the stamp of approval I needed to be in search for a job as a Unitarian Universalist minister. Just before my internship year, my last year in seminary, it became clear that my mother would die soon. I wasn't sure if I could finish our association's required reading list. This is on top of seminary. 58 items that include books, essays, and RE curriculum. I wasn't sure if I could finish this, write the 4 essays, prepare a sermon, and fill out all of the paperwork on top of the requirements of the internship, plus make multiple visits to Houston, where my mother lived. I wondered if I should postpone my December appointment to appear before the MFC. I consulted with my minister, denominational staff, and my internship supervisor. Everyone urged me to keep the appointment. They were confident that I would work hard. I deserved the highest marks. I could do this. Aspiring ministers tell their appearance before the decision-making body story, like combat soldiers tell war stories. We share them across denominations. I heard from my Methodist colleagues about postponements and doctrinal debates and outright refusals for people to become ministers. I remember one furtive conversation in the hallway of my seminary one afternoon while a Methodist colleague confessed that she did not agree with the doctrine of original sin. She could get approval from her governing body to become an ordained elder, she said, but she'd have to agree not to preach or teach against the doctrine. Now, some of my Methodist colleagues admired the freedom I would one day have in the pulpit. They were less envious of the fact that when I appeared for my interview before our decision-making body, I could get questions not only about Christian beliefs, but I could get questions about all of the world's religions. The questions that Unitarian Universalist aspiring ministers get are so wide-ranging that they give you a 34-page PDF document that has been prepared with potential questions for studying. Now, I answered many questions that hour and a half I spent before the MFC. There was one, however, that does not appear in the 34-page document of study questions. I know, because I looked afterwards. That one question still haunts me to this day. I delivered my 10-minute sermon without a hitch and sat down nervously for the barrage of questions to begin. A hypothetical situation question here, another hypothetical question there, a question about our history, a question about governance. I was becoming more relaxed. We were joking. They were smiling. I was smiling. And then one of the ministers on the panel of 9 asked me this: what is the concept of grace in 5 world religions? I'll give you each religion separately, and you'll respond to each separately. All smiling stopped. I was stumped. Now, that part of the interview is mostly a blur, but I think it went something like this. 1, Christianity. The grace of God saves through Jesus Christ. There were these 2 guys in the 4th century, Augustine and Pelagius, I feel like I need puppets for this, who argued with each other about humankind's role in grace. Augustine, based on his own experience of wanton behavior before he was saved, said no. We are completely corrupted by sin and cannot do anything on our own behalf except by the grace of God. Pelagius championed free will and said, yes, we can move towards grace. We human beings are not so broken by sin. We do have the ability to respond to grace. This is what Presbyterian minister Frederick Buechner meant when he wrote, there's only one catch. Like any other gift, the gift of grace can be yours only if you'll reach out and take it. Only I didn't mention Buechner. I was starting to wonder what could come next, because isn't grace a Christian concept? 2, Hinduism. Oh, wait, maybe not. I had followed a guru for several years and knew that we were always being taught about the grace of the guru. The source of grace in some forms of Hinduism is a guru, I mumbled pathetically, even joking about how my spiritual practice had been sort of a Hinduism light, a Hinduism influenced by Western thought and Christianity. Perhaps that's why we had grace. Except we weren't joking and smiling anymore. I think I was beginning to sweat. 3, Islam. I suddenly remembered that a colleague had advised me that if I was asked a question that I didn't know the answer to, I should instead answer a question that I did know the answer to. Wait a minute, I thought, they want to know if I know anything about world religions. Grace, for Muslims, can be found in the 5 pillars, which include belief, worship, charitable giving, fasting during the month of Ramadan, and a pilgrimage to Mecca. Sure, the look on the questioner's face seemed to say, but isn't that a list of works, things to do, rules to live by? And isn't grace an inner knowing, a change of heart? Making no comment, she politely moved on. 4, Buddhism. On a roll now, having figured out what the real question was, I mentioned the Eightfold Path as a source of grace, and the 3 treasures of Buddhism, the Buddha, the Sangha, and the Dharma. If we follow the Eightfold Path, we will be freed from suffering. Buddhists follow this path while taking refuge in the Buddha, the community, and the teachings. Again, focusing on something to be done rather than a state of being. I knew I might be lost, so I started to pray for grace. I judged by the look on the questioner's face that she was panicking right along with me, and now she wanted this question to be over with as much as I did. 5, Unitarian Universalism. My first thought was, how can Unitarian Universalism have a concept of grace? We don't agree on anything. By grace, I did not say that, but rather commented on the diverse nature of our beliefs, so the source of grace would be diverse. What is important for Unitarian Universalists who historically have rejected the doctrine of original sin is the question, what does grace do to us? Why do we still have amazing grace in our hymnals, one might wonder. Grace is transformation, I said. Grace means no matter who we are, no matter what we've done, no matter how badly we've answered the important questions in our lives. I didn't actually say that last part. No matter how broken we are loved. Healing is possible. Transformation is possible. Grace is the antidote to perfectionism. Grace teaches us that we are good enough. And like we leave room for milk in our Starbucks coffee, Unitarian Universalists leave room for grace. The questioner looked relieved that this inquisition was over. We moved on to other matters like anti-racism, multiculturalism, ethics, and religious education. The smiling and the joking came back into the room. Rebecca Ann Parker writes, "I believe that we must doubt our doubt that there is grace. We must open ourselves to the possibility that there are sources beyond ourselves that sustain us, transform us, save us, that hold us tight in the arms of life." Her story is the most dramatic illustration of grace I have ever heard. Despairing lost love and a decision to have an abortion, one night Rebecca heads to the cold waters of Lake Union in Seattle to kill herself. She is thwarted in her mission by the Seattle Astronomy Club, who in the middle of the night had set up a line of telescopes to view the stars. "I know there is grace," she writes, "because my life was saved by the Seattle Astronomy Club." I know there is grace. I know there is grace. I know there is grace because I imagine this scene differently. It is a scene that we have witnessed too many times lately. What if Rebecca had been armed with a gun? What if she refused to accept the gift of grace being offered to her freely by a loving universe and a geek with a telescope? What if her despair was so blinding she could not see the beauty of the night sky? My interview with the Ministerial Fellowship Committee ended well. I was escorted down the hall to wait in a room with a volunteer who was serving as a chaplain, because sometimes these things don't end well. There was another candidate there waiting for the results from her interview, and my daughter, who had accompanied me to be present for whatever my results turned out to be. I stand here now because of grace. The grace I have received from time to time throughout my life has sometimes been dramatic, but mostly it is a quiet reminder that my life is not my own. Yes, I passed the MFC, despite my awkwardness with the concept of grace in 5 world religions. The gift of grace that day was not that I passed, not that my daughter was there to witness the end of a very long journey. The gift that day was the realization that I had removed that word from my vocabulary. I had removed that word from my vocabulary of faith because I couldn't get past old-fashioned phrases like, "Better by the grace," and "There, but for the grace of God, go I." Now I look for grace, so I'll be ready to reach out and take it when life offers it. I do nothing but accept it. I am nothing but grateful. Several weeks ago, the board, the council, and the Committee on Ministry met to explore what barriers we have unconsciously erected in our desire to grow this fellowship and to share Unitarian Universalism with our community. We spent the afternoon reviewing the strategic plan, a list of things to do with measurable results. Now, strategic plans are designed to be about doing. They are often based on ideas of fixing what is wrong, on seeing what is not good enough, and then making plans to find solutions to problems. We are all so used to running our lives this way. We forget to leave room in the cup for milk. We forget to leave room in our plans for grace. Grace teaches us that we are good enough now. Grace teaches us that beautiful and terrible things will happen. Grace also teaches us that there is a gift waiting for us at the bottom of the hill, at the end point of our despair, at the end, and at the moment we reach out and take it. The gift of grace is ours. May it be so, and amen. Grace enters in when we least expect it. When we define ourselves as a community and we call ourselves we, call ourselves us, sometimes that cup of coffee is full and we haven't left room for milk. We haven't left room for the grace that comes in every time a new person enters into this sanctuary. And so in the spirit of inviting people in, of inviting grace in to our sanctuary, I have given you back your words, the words that this community used for so many years as the words that accompanied the extinguishing of the chalice. But I'm printing them in the order of service. And here's how I would like us to do this when I'm here in the pulpit and when I'm not in the pulpit, because I want us to welcome everyone in. And so, these words are printed in your order of service, and will everyone please join in these words? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
We are the Caneo Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Our mission is to nurture spiritually courageous people who transform the world through justice and compassion. Like us on Facebook, check out our website at CVUUF.org, or come visit us. See you soon!